Hello and welcome to Middle East Matters. Coming up in the show, Houthi rebels in Yemen step up their offensive on a key northern government stronghold. The Houthis spying an opportunity in the wake of a US decision to withdraw support from the Saudi-led military campaign in the country. Pope Francis gears up for the first ever papal visit to Iraq to meet Christian communities persecuted during the Islamic State group's reign of terror. And we head to Egypt, where the return of foreign tourists can't come soon enough for a sector buckling under the weight of global travel restrictions. Last month, the US withdrew its support for the Saudi-led coalition fighting Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. And in response, the Houthis have stepped up their efforts to capture the city of Marib, a strategic oil hub and the last northern stronghold of the country's internationally recognised government. The renewed fighting threatening to further destabilise a region that's already taken in some 2 million Yemenis displaced by the conflict. Brian Quinn explains.
Marib, in northern Yemen, the latest flashpoint in the country's grinding civil war, where hundreds of fighters have reportedly been killed in recent days. Once largely overlooked, Marib has taken on major strategic significance. For one, it's the internationally recognized government's last bastion of control in the country's north, most of which was overrun by Houthi rebels in 2014. It's also the regional capital of Yemen's most oil-rich area. Its loss would represent a major blow, both economic and symbolic, to the government. The Houthis have been trying to take Marib for a year now. They stepped up their offensive in February as the US withdrew its support for the Saudi-led military campaign to dislodge them.
This war has to end. And to underscore our commitment, we are ending all American support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sales.
Washington also ended its designation of the Houthis as a terrorist organization, in part to keep humanitarian aid flowing in areas under their control, but also to lay the groundwork for peace talks with the government. The rebels, though, have used those recent developments to regroup and expand their territory ahead of any potential nationwide ceasefire. Meanwhile, humanitarian pressure is building in what has up to now been one of the country's few peaceful enclaves. Some 2 million Yemenis have landed in Marib province after fleeing fighting elsewhere in the country. Many of them live in vast camps surrounding the city. They now find themselves on the front lines of the Houthis' three-sided assault.
We are from Hodeidah. At first we fled to Damar, but we faced difficult living conditions. Then we went to Sirwa, but the problems of the war followed us. Now we have come to Marib.
The 6-year conflict has pushed millions to the brink of famine. In 2018, an attempt by the Saudi coalition to retake the port city of Hodeidah was abandoned amid international objections to the civilian costs. NGOs now say similar international action is needed to avoid a humanitarian disaster in Marib.
Israel has committed to providing COVID vaccines for around 130,000 Palestinians who work in Israel and its settlements in the West Bank. That is over half of all Israelis have now received at least one dose. Recent weeks have also seen thousands of asylum seekers and undocumented migrants receive the jab, but that particular part of the rollout has now been halted, with no official explanation as to why. Iris Makler reports from Tel Aviv.
It's the last day for the first dose. Hundreds of asylum seekers and foreign workers have been at this vaccination centre since dawn.
Me, I'm coming 5.5. I come in here first. You come in, everything not order.
Everyone here is worried about their health, but also keeping their jobs.
I came because I've been hearing rumors that you won't be able to take a bus, you're not going to do this, and so I had to vaccinate because I'm using a bus going to work.
Tilly is an asylum seeker from South Africa who works as a cleaner.
Some of us, we are working. By the time we get here, they are closed already. And in the mornings, they open at 10. We have to be at work. Like today, I didn't go to work. I don't think I'll make it to work. Big time.
After 5 hours, Tilly finally gets her first dose.
Do you have kids? Yes.
The nurses say they're proud that Israel is vaccinating undocumented migrants free of charge.
I think it's amazing and important, and we need as much as more people vaccinated. People really appreciate this opportunity. They're like really thankful and they're very polite, even more maybe than the Israelis, I don't know. And they really, they want to come here and they understand that it's important.
Israel has now vaccinated some 15,000 foreign workers and asylum seekers. But aid agencies estimate that leaves 45,000 still to go and are calling on the government to vaccinate them all.
In defiance of both the pandemic and security concerns, Pope Francis has confirmed the first ever papal visit to Iraq is going ahead. The 3-day trip, starting this Friday, will see the Pope meet ancient Christian communities devastated in battles with the Islamic State group. He'll also be taking part in an interfaith service. Emerald Maxwell has the details.
Preparing for an historic visit. These Christians in Erbil are busy practicing for a special Mass in the presence of the Pope.
We're practicing Mass and the hymns. We have another group that's preparing the Mass prayers in Italian, but we're keeping the Psalms and praises in Arabic and Assyrian.
Most of Iraq's dwindling Christian population now live here in Erbil, in the semi-autonomous Kurdish region. Francis will be the first ever Pope to visit Iraq, intending to provide its Christians with a much-needed morale boost. His 3-day trip will include an interfaith meeting in the ancient Mesopotamian city of Ur, an event archaeologists hope will draw renewed attention to what's thought to be the birthplace of Abraham. Pope Francis will also meet with one of the world's foremost Shia leaders, al-Sistani, as part of his efforts to improve Christian relations with Muslims.
The visit of the most senior man of the Catholic Christian faith in the world to the most senior man of the Shia sect sends a clear and important message, which is the call for peace, harmony and humanity, regardless of religion.
The Pope will also visit what's left of Iraq's ancient Christian communities, now dispersed in villages in the northern Nineveh Plains and Mosul, whose once thriving community is today reduced to no more than 70 families. Danun Yahya, with his wife and children, are among the few to have returned since the Islamic State group retreated in 2017.
They wrote on the door, "The Islamic State group is eternal," as they were leaving.
Most Christians fled the country during the sectarian conflict that followed the 2003 US-led invasion. The mass exodus was then accelerated when the Islamic State group invaded.
I tell the others to come back, that the situation is good again, that it's not like before. But there's no more trust, no one is coming back.
Iraq's Christian population today is estimated to number around 300,000, a fifth of the 1.5 million who lived in the country before 2003.
Egypt's economy is heavily reliant on tourism, but pandemic restrictions mean the usual snaking queues at the country's famous archaeological sites are now a distant memory. In the almost complete absence of foreign tourists, Egyptians are being encouraged to discover their own country. But many working in the industry say it's simply not enough. Catherine Keder-Clifford and our colleagues at France 2 have this report.
A sight that merits getting out of bed before dawn. A year ago, there were 4 times more hot air balloons taking off into the sunrise. Since then, the pandemic has left the majority of international tourists stuck at home, with just a handful of foreign visitors now mixing with Egyptian holidaymakers, mainly coming from Cairo or Alexandria.
The aim of our president, he was encouraging us to come to visit the sightseeing all over Egypt, so we can encourage others to come and to help the people who are working in tourism.
The few hotels still open are almost deserted. This is one of Luxor's most renowned resorts. It dramatically cut its rates in a bid to attract tourists, without much success. Though some, like this French couple, take the risk, many are still wary to get back to travelling. The country has recorded some 10,000 deaths among its 100 million population, a low rate compared to other states. Here in the Luxor region, the majority of households depend on tourism. In the Valley of the Kings, as many as 8,000 people flock to visit the tombs each day, queuing for hours to admire the bas-relief wall carvings inside. For guides like Hoda Kamel, the blow to business has been devastating.
Our life depends on the money we earned over the past few years, from 2017 to 2019. For the past year, we've earned nothing, absolutely nothing.
Souvenir vendors and craftsmen are also in crisis. These stonemasons are the direct descendants of those who built the pharaoh's tombs.
I don't know what other work we could find. We live in the mountains. We live this way. We gather stones, we carve them, and we sell our work to tourists. If tourism is finished, then we have to stay at home.
In 2019, tourism represented 2 million jobs across Egypt and a total of 10 billion euros in annual earnings, a figure which has fallen by 60% over the past year.
Well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Middle East Matters. Thank you very much for watching and see you again next week.